I'm Sandra Smith.
I'm Brett Baer.
I'm Ainsley Earhart, and this is the Fox News Rundown.
Friday, April 17th, 2020. I'm Chris Foster. President Trump wants to get the economy moving again. Fox News Sunday host Chris Wallace says it's not really his decision.
In the end, the economy is the decision of millions of individual consumers and customers, and nobody's going to tell them what to do. They're going to decide what they want to do.
I'm Dave Anthony. Many of us are only shopping online these days or in grocery stores with so many others closed. What happens when those orders are lifted?
I believe a lot of them are never going to open again, or certainly they'll be much smaller than they were before the coronavirus hit.
And I'm Tammy Bruce. I've got the final word on the Fox News Rundown.
As we end a fourth week under federal guidelines for dealing with coronavirus, President Trump says it's time to start looking ahead.
Based on the latest data, our team of experts now agrees that we can begin the next front in our war, which we are calling opening up America again. And that's what we're doing. We're opening up our country, and we have to do that. America wants to be open, and Americans want to be open.
The president has a lot to juggle, making what he's called the most important decisions of his time in office, balancing concerns about lives and livelihoods, and increasingly, perhaps, the politics of it all.
I think it's become a political football.
Chris Wallace is the host of Fox News Sunday.
The difference is this has real, immediate, real-life implications. It has tremendous implications for public health. It has tremendous implications for the economy and the millions of people who have lost their jobs. So it's a political football, but as opposed to some of those, which, you know, we talk about for years, and obviously they have real-world effects, but nothing seems to happen. When the president, first of all, he's not going to open anything. He's going to release guidelines, and then governors and mayors will decide whether to reopen. And even ultimately, it's going to be up to the individual companies. Governor isn't going to order, the Acme hardware company to open. It's going to be up to the owners of the company whether to open, and the employees whether to go back or to go to customers to go to a restaurant. That's going to be a hugely important thing. And the most interesting development I saw was that the president was talking to the leaders of various sectors. And when he talked to the leaders of the financial and banking industries, they really pushed back on him. And they said two things. One, we need a lot more testing than we've had. We've had 3 million tests so far, which is a lot. It sounds like an enormous number, but they were talking about needing 1 million tests a day to have a much better sense just how prevalent the virus is in American society. And two, companies are saying, we want protections, liability protection. So if we say the Acme hardware company, we're going to send our employees back to work, and there's a spike and they start to get the virus, that they can't then sue their employers and say, you ordered us back to work and we got sick.
In the end, it's not President Trump, it's not even governors, it's us that are going to decide when this gets reopened, if we're going to go and sit in a restaurant, sit at a bar. If there are ever concerts again, go to a concert. And if we don't feel safe, we're not going to do that. And somebody's going to have to step up and make that a reality.
Well, I don't know that you can anybody step up and make it a reality. I mean, I was talking with my wife about this, and I was saying, particularly on discretionary things, ultimately, if you have to go back to work or you have to go to the grocery store, you do. But, nobody has to go to a restaurant. Restaurant has to be open, but the customers don't have to come. Before my wife and I, or my guess is you and your significant other would do that, you're going to have a long, hard talk. Is it worth going to a restaurant and having somebody, even with mask and gloves, serve me food and be, within 6 or 8 feet of somebody, even if there's plexiglass between us? And, why do I want to do that anyway? Because It doesn't sound like much fun. But how do you get in the first time you get on an airplane? After all this, how are you going to feel about it? So, and particularly if it's not an absolutely must-work thing, but it's, something more discretionary, especially now when you've got telework and Zoom and all of these connections that we have. You're exactly right. In the end, the economy, or go to a store and buy things, in the end, the economy is the decision of millions of individual consumers and customers, and nobody's going to tell them what to do. They're going to decide what they want to do.
Since we talked last week, Joe Biden has all the big endorsements now. We got Bernie Monday, Barack Obama on Tuesday, Elizabeth Warren. It wasn't long ago that the headlines were Dems in disarray, and now they seem very much in array earlier than we might have guessed a couple of months ago.
Oh, absolutely. Think back. I mean, except for when Barack Obama was running for re-election in 2012, the party has not been this united really since 2004 and John Kerry, because if you remember Obama and Clinton in 2008, Clinton and Sanders in 2016, it went back into June, even July. I mean, there were some questions. Hillary Clinton didn't release her delegates and, formally support Barack Obama until the convention in Denver in 2008. So this is, in a situation where there are a lot of disadvantages for Joe Biden, obviously that he's stuck in his basement of his home in Delaware and can't go out and campaign and can't excite people. This is an advantage that here we are in the very beginning of April, and the party is really united. Elizabeth Warren, Barack Obama, Bernie Sanders is really united behind him. Now, it's tough to mobilize support. It's tough to raise money in the current world we're living in, particularly money with people's economic futures so uncertain. Having said that, I do think that Donald Trump is a huge organizing principle for Democrats and for Joe Biden. And, my guess is once we get to Labor Day, that and hopefully by then the COVID virus is not quite as clear and present as danger as it seems to be now, that this will be a fair and evenly fought election between the president and Joe Biden.
I hope so. President Trump has been making a lot of noise against moves for more mail balloting, voting by mail, just in case there are spikes in certain areas. I'm not really sure what his problem with it is. I don't know that there's evidence that Democrats would vote more by mail than Republicans would.
No, it's odd. I mean, he's saying that it lends itself to corruption, it lends itself to cheating, abuse, and there certainly have been cases of that. But there have been cases of Republicans doing it, and in fact, a lot of Republicans, at the same time that he was talking about it in North Carolina, the GOP was running a big, get absentee ballot campaign to try to get, people to vote that way. Generally speaking, most people, both parties have generally favored early balloting, absentee balloting, mail-in balloting, making it easier for people to vote. And I don't think there's really much of a record, documentary record that shows that Democrats are advantaged by mail-in balloting more than Republicans are. But, and as I say, there are a lot of local candidates, Republican candidates, who are all for mail-in balloting. Heck, the president did it himself when he voted in Florida.
Yeah, and members of the military overseas vote by mail, and nobody seems to be worried about fraud there. Stacey Abrams from Georgia is all but campaigning to be Biden's running mate. Elizabeth Warren was asked. She said yes, would say yes if it was offered. Any thoughts on who helps him politically?
Well, I think two things. One, he's committed to a woman. Now, some people are saying, well, in this crisis, he doesn't need a woman, but that's something kind of insulting about that, saying, well, now the stakes are really important, so we can't afford to have a woman. I don't think that will go over very well. You would, first of all, the question of who the vice president is, we always love to play it because it's always an open question. We, the media, it always is vastly overstated in terms of its importance. If your vice presidential running mate can get you one state, that's a big deal, and that would argue for somebody like Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan, because of the fact that that's a key swing state that Trump was able to take from the Democrats, traditionally a Democratic state, in 2016, and Democrats really need to get it back. Having said that, I do think that with this crisis, and she's new on the scene. I mean, I think she just became a governor at the start of this year. You need, or I guess maybe it was the start of 2019, you really, I think, because of this crisis, are going to need somebody with a lot of hands-on government experience which I think would argue less for a Whitmer and less, frankly, for a Stacey Abrams and more for an Elizabeth Warren or a Amy Klobuchar or a Kamala Harris. In other words, somebody who's been in public life a little bit longer and has bona fides, particularly with Biden, who's 77 years old. I think the one test, I think, for the vice president that he picks is, can you really see them as a president on the second day of that administration?
Real quick, Chris, President Trump went after you again and Fox in general the other day. He was displeased by a line of questioning.
Did he really?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm teasing.
You didn't hear?
Yeah.
I don't even remember what the line of questioning was, but it was pretty innocuous, as I recall. And I'm sure that there are some Fox viewers and listeners of this radio show and this podcast that take issue with sometimes with lines of questioning that you might take or Brett Baer might take or somebody on the news side. What do you say to them? Those viewers and those listeners.
Yes, I think he specifically was referring to the fact that I was asking people about the big story in the New York Times that seemed to document pretty well that the president, despite some warnings from people in his administration, was slow to issue the guidelines on social distancing and stay at home until mid-March. What I would say is, watch the interviews I do with Democrats. I'm a tough interviewer, and I think I'm known in the viewing community that way, and I know I'm known in the political community that way. I know that Mitch McConnell has said I'm the toughest Sunday show interviewer, and he always says to his new Republican senators, don't think because you're going on Fox, if you're with Chris Wallace, you're going to get an easy interview. But I'm known that way in the Democratic community as well. And, I would just say to anybody who thinks that maybe I'm a closet liberal or a closet Democrat, just go on YouTube. You got some time today, or Google, and watch the interview I did with James Comey a couple of months ago when the Inspector General report came out about abuses with FISA. As somebody once asked Vince Lombardi, the legendary football coach, does he discriminate against the players like he's tougher on the grunts than he is on the stars? And this one player said, no, he treats us all like dogs. And that's the way I feel. I'm the cop on the beat, and I wield the nightstick, and I try to keep everybody honest.
All right, Chris Wallace, according to the president, even worse than sleepy-eyed Chuck Todd. Chris, thanks for coming on the show.
Now, that's an insult.
All right, stay safe. Have a good day. Thanks, Chris.
You bet. Thank you.
This is Tammy Bruce with your Fox News commentary coming up.
We all want this nightmare to be over. From the many of us stuck at home to the president to the governors who will be in charge of lifting the coronavirus orders.
In this reopening, we could lose all the progress we made in 1 week if we do it wrong.
Andrew Cuomo's state, New York, has been hit hardest by far with about a third of all the U.S. cases, so he is not yet ready to reopen.
The close-down policies will be extended in coordination with other states to May 15th.
And he's talking about other states in the New York region, which is going to add to the pain in the retail industry, with so many stores closed. In March, U.S. retail sales plunged almost 9%. That's the biggest drop on record. And the shutdowns didn't even happen until later in the month. Clothing sales were cut in half from February.
On the one hand, this is a very deep decline in retail sales. On the other hand, it's totally expected. Many of these stores are shuttered by law.
Jerry Storch runs his own company, Storch Advisors. But he's been in the business a long time. He was once the CEO of Toys R Us. He also ran Hudson Bay, which owns Saks. And he was a Target vice chairman. To
me, I'm actually optimistic about it. It shows there's still life out there. And it also shows people are doing what we've asked them to do in terms of sheltering at home. And you can see that in the sales patterns.
Obviously, people, if they're doing shopping, unless it's grocery, they're doing it from home. And a lot of times, even at home, they're doing the online and then going to the store and picking it up. Obviously, online sales have picked up over the years. This probably puts it maybe over the top.
Yeah, I think this. I say this is a rapid acceleration of trends that existed before. So you see e-commerce growing even more rapidly because people, of course, feel safer getting a package delivered than going to a store, and also you can buy anything on e-commerce still. Not just necessities. So this is a big boost for e-commerce, and some of that is definitely going to stick. And this is also a big problem for the malls, which have been in decline for some time, and for apparel stores, because apparel, clothing is not a necessity, and people clearly are not buying that even online in big numbers during this period.
Yeah, I mean, people are working from home in their pajamas. I mean, who's buying anything formal? Who's buying anything suits and all that kind of stuff? Nobody needs it, and nobody knows for how long. So a store like Macy's or a clothing store, what do they do?
Well, they have to rely heavily on their e-commerce arms, and some of them built good e-commerce arms, some didn't. So Macy's and Nordstrom have done a pretty good job of building strong e-commerce businesses. Having said that, you're looking at 20 to 30% of their business before this hit. And frankly, I don't think it's even growing in terms of absolute scale. It's probably shrinking in this market, but that's all they have left, and their bricks and mortar are shuttered. Then you have other stores like at JCPenney who never really did get off the mark on growing a strong e-commerce business. And so not only are all their stores closed, but they don't really have a strong e-commerce leg to live on. But that's all there is, and that's what they need to do.
JCPenney, obviously we had Sears, which was already in a huge decline with Kmart, maybe going away. How many of these kinds of stores are never going to come back?
I believe a lot of them are never going to open again, or certainly they'll be much smaller than they were before the coronavirus hit. In the United States, we probably have 2 to 3 times the retail square footage per capita that we really need in this country. And so you saw that being reflected in constant store closings. That's going to accelerate dramatically. Many of these companies, even if they get handed a lifeline during the coronavirus crisis, because nobody wants to put an American icon out of business right now, they'll run into severe problems next year or the year after. So a lot of them are out there talking to their lenders. They're restructuring their debt. Penny's is reportedly, trying to decide whether to go Chapter 11 or not, but they're certainly going to need to restructure their debt. And even Marcus is highly leveraged. Macy's and Nordstrom and Kohl's all have covenant issues coming up on their debt. So they're all going to have to renegotiate with their banks. But on the other end, it doesn't look that much brighter for them. The problem is they were losing before. And so if they end up in a more leveraged situation coming out of this, it only makes it that much more bleak, especially with consumers learning that they really can get along without them.
Yeah, we talked, a lot of people talked going into even this year, way before the corona crisis ever emerged. Do we really need a department store anymore?
You had e-commerce up, of course, as we've discussed. So Amazon is just on fire. It's phenomenal how strong they are in this situation. And they were up 20% year over year before this. So just imagine, mass merchants like Walmart and Target and Costco have been gobbling up share for a long time, and they're grabbing even more right now because their stores are open, because they sell necessities too during this period. The pharmacies are doing well because, of course, they sell necessities. The grocery stores and the liquor stores are thriving because, of course, people are eating and drinking, trust me, at home. And so that's growing a lot. This for some of them, they were kind of taking it on the chin a little bit as people were eating out more. Now that's shifted back to the grocery stores. So this is maybe some help to grocery stores in the future. And of course, right. Home Depot and Lowe's, building supply people, they're up year over year, even in March, because again, they sell necessities, things that you need for your home, things to keep your home safe and clean and working. So they're doing great. So these were all the winners before. Meanwhile, the losers, this simply accelerates the pattern, with department stores declining, clothing declining across the board. Too much bricks and mortar right now, way too much. And the pace of store closings will double or triple as we get into next spring.
You brought up malls. They've had a lot of hard times in the last couple of years with the rise in e-commerce and department stores closing. So if malls can reopen, how many can survive, and how do they survive? How much more will they have to shift toward entertainment?
Well, they were already making a big push there, and some of the best operators, like Simon, for example, who runs a great operation, they were already making this shift. The problem they have now is something they can't control. Right? First of all, many of their tenants, can't pay the rent, so that's a big problem. But
big, yeah.
Secondly, the customer's afraid to go out in public, so it's not worth taking that kind of personal risk to most people to go to a mall just for discretionary shopping. It feels like a dalliance or a frivolous action in times like these. And it's going to seem like that until one of two things happen. Either we have a vaccine, which is over a year away, everyone says, or until there really is enough comprehensive mass testing that people feel safe. And I don't think there are even any plans to test on that kind of scale. So I believe traffic at malls is going to be greatly suppressed for at least a year, which is a long time. So many of these malls, the B and C malls that were already in trouble, they're going to close.
You mentioned rent. How do companies and landlords in the retail business hang on if stores don't pay? How long can they last and keep things going?
It's a big problem because they tend to be the mall owners tend to be highly leveraged. So they basically have sold those rent streams, if you will, right, as they've mortgaged their property. So they have a mortgage to pay on the property on the other end. So it's not like they can just say, oh, I get it. It's so sad that you're closed. You don't have to pay your rent. If you were an individual and you see great stories about owners of individual properties saying that to their tenants, forget about it. Don't pay rent now. You don't need to. That's great. But if you're a big developer and you've already leveraged these properties and you have mortgages due on the other end, what do you do when your tenants aren't paying you? So this can create a severe distress in the commercial mortgage market down the line from the retail market. So you have a need for sort of tri-party negotiations between the retail tenants, the landlords, and the landlords' creditors, who can't just say, it's okay, don't pay me. They expect those payments. So there's a big problem here that has to be worked out. And it's big. It's not small. This is a big number in the scope of the U.S. economy.
Let's talk about the small, little stores, as people call them, the mom and pops in main streets across America. They probably don't have big e-commerce operations. What do they do, and how many of them might not make it?
Well, fortunately, a lot of them are able to get help from the government. Most of the big retailers are too large under the current programs to get federal assistance. So many of the smaller retailers can, and that'll give them some opportunity to make their way forward. Now, those who are weak before, they're not going to survive regardless. Those who were strong before, they're probably able to come out of this thanks to prompt action by the administration and by Congress on passing support for these businesses. But even then, when there's not enough money in the world, when the world finally reopens, we're going to have a problem with the willingness of the consumer, with the consumer psyche, the willingness to go out there and to mingle the way that they used to, unless we have a vaccine or much more comprehensive testing than what we have in place and than what we're even planning.
Is Amazon going to emerge now as the clear number one, or is Walmart still with them?
I wouldn't sell Walmart short. It's interesting that both stocks, Walmart and Amazon, hit their all-time highs earlier this week on the stock exchange. So they're both doing great. Walmart is doing fantastic in groceries. They're the largest grocer in the U.S., and Amazon has not cracked that nut. I think Amazon made a huge strategic error buying Whole Foods. It was the wrong grocer. They should have bought a Kroger or Albertsons or someone more omnipresent than Whole Foods and someone who doesn't have quite that high-end positioning. And so Amazon really still is not a major player in the grocery industry, and Walmart is the leader. And so they're able to leverage that across the whole world of retail and e-commerce. So Walmart is by far the largest grocer in the country. A large part of their e-commerce business is grocery, both delivery and pickup at the store. Meanwhile, Amazon, of course, is doing great. They are the king and queen of the internet. They are so much larger than anyone else, is not even close. So when people talk about Walmart versus Amazon, Amazon is 10 times Walmart's size in e-commerce sales.
Much has been made during this coronavirus nightmare, and rightly so, about the heroics of doctors and nurses and EMTs and all the other medical workers on the front lines putting themselves at risk. You know who else is? Those who work in grocery stores, pharmacies, and other retailers still open and considered essential.
The checkouts and the clerks and the people that are really, and a number of those people have become infected. So we want to thank them and a shout out to them.
And that was President Trump the other day. Now, these employees are not typically making a lot of money. Some get minimum wage or not much more, doing what are considered low-paid jobs. What are these stores doing for them?
First of all, most of them have given them, raises, have given them extra pay for this period. So that's a good thing. But it's not enough. And secondly, what you can do during this period is pay a lot of attention to their welfare. Make sure they have the right protective equipment, the right education on how to keep themselves safe, the right health care, and also create an environment where when they're feeling sick, it's okay to raise your hand and not come to work. And so it's from those daily communications with your workers that you can let them know that you do care about them, even as they do get a nice bump in pay. That will be very helpful to them during a time when the economy is troubled.
Jerry Storch, CEO for Storch Advisors. We really appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
From the Fox News Podcasts Network, download and listen to The Untold Story with Martha McCallum. The host of The Story on Fox News Channel sits down with major newsmakers each week to get their untold story. Subscribe and listen now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com. Subscribe to this podcast at foxnewspodcasts.com.
And now, some good news with Tonya J. Powers.
You may not have ever envisioned a world in which we needed to be reminded to put on clothes before going outside, but here we are. The Taneytown, Maryland Police Department is telling people to do just that with a recent Facebook post. It says, quote, "Please remember to put pants on before leaving the house to check your mailbox. You know who you are. This is your final warning." So far, the post has been shared more than 7,000 times and has more than 2,800 likes. It's not the first time the department has used humor in posts to its 11,000 followers. The department also recently urged people to stay indoors using the lyrics to Baby Shark, and they also posted a Tiger King meme. Tonya J. Powers, Fox News.
It's time for your Fox News commentary. Tammy Bruce. What's on your mind?
Americans have been doing a fantastic job following the coronavirus guidance of the president, their governors, and perhaps also their local leaders when it comes to social distancing and taking precautions not just for ourselves and for our own health, but for those around us. Yet, lo and behold, certain politicians have mistaken our willingness to adhere to social distancing and stay-at-home guidelines as a signal that they can do whatever they please. We now see various mayors and governors using this time of crisis to issue extraordinary, and as many see it, unconstitutional orders in the name of public health and safety during this time of pandemic. We are adults. We understand the suggestions we've been given, proven by the overwhelming adherence to the federal guidelines in the midst of this crisis. We also know when orders are inappropriate, at the very least, and unconstitutional abuses of power at the worst. People reacted with some shock when video from Italy revealed a lone jogger along an empty beach being chased by a police officer. But it would be wrong to dismiss that as unique European totalitarianism. Other shocking video has alarmed the public, including the scene of 10 Philadelphia police officers dragging a passenger off a bus for not wearing a face mask, as noted by the National Review, which also tells us of a scene in Brighton, Colorado, with cops handcuffing a father in front of his family for playing t-ball with his daughter in an empty park. Getting a great deal of attention appropriately in the follies of governors as little tyrants is Michigan's Gretchen Whitmer. Tucker Carlson of Fox News said many hospitals in Michigan are now discharging more coronavirus patients than they're admitting. In fact, an emergency hospital under construction outside Detroit has slashed its bed count from 1,000 to 250. Why? The expected number of patients failed to arrive. He then noted that Ms. Whitmer has not only not acknowledged this, but she is doubling down on her efforts to control the movement and freedom of the people of Michigan. Quote, "Last week, Whitmer banned all gatherings anywhere for any reason of any size, including in people's private homes, as if she is allowed to do that," Mr. Carlson said. She has also banned people from traveling between their own homes. Part of her announcement of the increasing crackdown included, quote, "Big box stores will also have to close areas of the store that are dedicated to things like carpeting or flooring, furniture, garden centers, plant nurseries, or paint. If you're not buying food or medicine or other essential items, you shouldn't be going to the store." How is purchasing paint or gardening tools or seeds to plant your own food during a pandemic unessential? Who gets to decide what becomes a question of all of us when it comes to how we shop and what we deem as essential for our own lives during a crisis? Few of us believe politicians know what's best in that case. It is our responsibility as responsible citizens to implement sensible and productive efforts, such as the federal coronavirus guidelines, to slow and eventually stop this pandemic. And we are doing exactly that. But what we will not agree to is the torching of the U.S. Constitution or the destruction of the country by people who seem drunk on unconstitutional power they imagine is afforded to them in a crisis.
This is Tammy Bruce.
You've been listening to the Fox News Rundown. Stay up to date by subscribing to this podcast at foxnewspodcasts.com. And for up-to-the-minute news, go to foxnews.com.
Love Fox News? Click the subscribe button to get more of the news and opinion you trust, and click the Fox News Rundown playlist for the latest episodes.